your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. This is the Atheist Manifesto. Hello, dear friends, and welcome to the Atheist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined once again by my fantabulous co-host, Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
I have a hook hand. Oh, God. Oh, no. Very...
It's like the first video episode we've done, and you've got video gags. This is the greatest thing
Couldn't
ever.
think of anything, just reached for whatever was on my table. Found my hook hand.
Fantastic.
That's very good.
If you missed a live show, it's your fault.
Right. Well, this week we are going to have a discussion I've wanted to have on the show for some time about addiction and addictive behavior and recovery and evidence-based methods for that and how it can affect queer and trans people uniquely with our good friend, Trav Mamone. Welcome back to the show, friend.
Oh, thanks for having me back. It's always a joy to join y'all.
So why don't you just kind of give us the rundown? How did this whole thing start for you?
Unlike a lot of people, I actually was a pretty much straight edge for most of my life, even in high school. I mean,
We should probably explain what that means.
Oh, yeah, straight edge. Basically means no smoking, no drinking alcohol, no drugs, no promiscuous sex. You know, it started off with the band Minor Threat, old DC punk band.
Don't drink, don't smoke, don't fuck.
At least I can fucking think.
Yep, exactly. I was a straight edge kid in high school.
I guess straight edge kids are allowed to swear, though. I was about to say, it sounds like my Christian upbringing, except for the swearing. Not allowed.
Actually, believe it or not, there were some people for whom straight edge meant no cussing either. Like they're like Christian straight edge kids. Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Digression. Go ahead, Trav.
Sure. So, yeah, I basically just, dabbled here and there, but never really got into any sort of substances until, of course, when I turned 21, then I was like, oh, now I can finally drink. But even then, I was always a moderate drinker. Slowly, things sort of progressed during the years. Like when I was in a terrible 6-year relationship, which I think I might have mentioned on the show once or twice, I would go through periods where I would sort of self-medicate and then go back to moderate social drinking and then, back and forth. Then for a while, I was just, buying, 6-pack of beer just to last me through the week. But then after a while, that kind of got, that wasn't enough. So then it came like, either 2 beers or 2 glasses of wine a night. Then like, I didn't really get into like really hard liquor until last year, actually, around this time. Anybody who's been following Facebook memories knows why.
Yeah, it's almost like something really significant happened about a year ago, right around this time. Weird.
Yep. And so, yeah, and that basically sort of led to me spending most of 2017 self-medicating with alcohol. I would rarely drink during the day, except sometimes if I felt like really jittery, like maybe if I had like sensory overload, like if I was, going on Facebook and listening to a podcast at the same time, trying to scroll through everybody's hot take on every single issue while listening to what people are trying to say and trying to process all of that would, make me all jittery and stuff. But mostly I would drink about 12 ounces, maybe 12 and a half of straight bourbon a night. And so by the time like 9 o'clock came and I was done drinking, I was like, staggering toward, tripping over my feet, trying to get to bed. And then I'd wake up, feeling groggy and stuff. But, I like to say that, bourbon was the medication I've always been looking for, because even despite all my years in therapy, even it's cognitive behavioral therapy, which is supposed to be the stuff that works like a charm, but it's still taking me a while to really, for it to really click for me. And also, I do take medication, psychiatric medications, but alcohol was just quicker, It was just like, this is what I want, a quick fix, just every night, just get totally shit-faced and, all the problems of the day would just, melt away, So that's the basis of how I, got to where I ended up.
So tell me about when you started to realize that it was problematic, because I mean, there are a lot of people who drink all the time, don't really have problems. It never becomes something that they might call an addiction, and it never, becomes maladaptive or starts to affect their life in a negative way. And you obviously came to that realization that might have been that way for you. So talk to me about that.
My therapist had been worried about my drinking for quite some time, and she even gave me some sort of questionnaire to fill out. And she was like, well, yeah, it kind of looks like you have some sort of a substance abuse syndrome thing. And I was like, nah. And alcoholics, that's just for people who wake up in the morning and start drinking a fifth. I'm not that bad.
And that's a common thing, right? Like people,
yeah.
And I don't even know that it's necessarily denial. It's just like it's like a slow, steady slide into that, and then it's all of a sudden you look back and it's like, oh gosh, yeah, I guess so. But like I'm guessing a lot of times in those situations, like it kind of feels like, well, yeah, that's how other people get into it. But for me, I'm just where I am. Like is that kind of how it was?
Yeah, it was. Definitely. As far as when I knew I had an actual problem. It was actually around about a month ago. I was interviewing Madison Kimry, who's been on the show, and it's kind of a funny story. I, of course, set it up so that we would record via Zencaster, but she was having problems logging in, and so I thought, okay, well, I'll try this thing where I link Skype up to Audacity and just do it that way. So it took me a long time to figure that out. And of course, I had already started drinking by then. I think I was about halfway, maybe a quarter done until we finally got everything all set up. I hit the record button, and I didn't think I was in bad shape. Then the next day, I listened to the recording to edit it, and the first thing I hear is, all right, thanks for joining me today, Madison. It's good to have you on the show. And I was like, oh my God. And I was trying to listen to the audio. I was like, oh God, is any of this salvageable? No, none of it was. It's like, so tell me, when did you get involved in activism? And there's this one section of it that I saved. The rest of it I deleted and completely re-recorded my vocals. There's one section I saved for an episode I did a few weeks later about my struggles with alcohol, that I put in that episode, where I sound literally like a drunk person just ranting about politics. It's like, yeah, it seems like there's so much stuff in the world, you just don't know how to do it. It's like, everyone say we need revolution now, and I'm like, you gotta overthrow the government money, you know what I'm saying? But I like what you're doing. And I was just shocked. I was like, that was my first sign that something was wrong. Then a couple of days later, I was having weird nervous jitters. I don't know if it was a combination of sensory overload, nervous about trying to re-record my vocals and get this episode done. But I was just felt sort of jittery and, almost like not exactly a panic attack, but almost like anxiety-like. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to start drinking. And so I don't know how much I had, but I was, come 4:30 in the afternoon, I was just totally fucked up. And that's when I basically knew, I should really do something about this.
Yeah, that's scary. I've had some flirtations with addiction. I don't know that I would ever classify I actually had aside from caffeine.
Yeah.
I'm still hooked.
Yeah,
on
sugar
that.
and caffeine are the American addictions right there.
Oh yeah,
Right.
and tobacco.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fair. But I developed a mild dependence on the opioids that I took after my bottom surgery, and it wasn't, I wasn't getting like jittery and getting these hardcore cravings or anything like that, but it was just it was almost that thing where it's like I needed them to feel normal, right? And like that's when they say like one of the ways that you know you're addicted is you're not doing the stuff to get high, you're doing the stuff to feel normal, right?
Yeah.
And I was so used to being in pain, and I was used to the feeling of that going away, and it became, instead of keeping me even, it became this incredible relief, and I got really, really kind of hooked on that feeling, which was really scary because I absolutely hated the way those meds made me feel. And then I started to like the way they made me feel, and I started to want that feeling, and I started to look forward to that feeling, and I was like, oh my God, this is terrifying. But like, I'm also in a whole fucking lot of pain, so I can't just stop. You know, and that was, I mean, I was freaking the fuck out because opioid addiction is scary as shit.
Yeah, especially since we heard about Tom Petty. It wasn't just heart failure; it was that fentanyl stuff. I forgot what exactly it's called, and apparently it's the same stuff that killed Prince and probably also Dolores O'Riordan from the Cranberries too. So yeah, that's some serious shit.
Well, right, and it was legitimately prescribed. Like, he wasn't abusing drugs.
Right,
He had a fucking broken hip. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that's so scary is like, it's not just people like, oh, I want to take this stuff to get high. You know, like it's legitimate stuff. But you know, and when I stopped taking them, I had really bad insomnia for like 2 weeks. Like I didn't get a good night's sleep for 2 weeks.
Oh wow.
And it was terrifying. And I have a history in my family with addiction. Like almost everyone on my mom and on both my mom and my dad's side of the family is a recovering alcoholic. An uncle of mine, I found out, actually went to prison for drugs. I didn't know that until just a few years ago. Yeah. And so like, and I know that there's a genetic component and that it runs in families. And that was why I was a straight edge kid in high school, because I was terrified of getting addicted to something or anything, you know, that like the entire idea of addiction just scares the shit out of me. And I've even had, severely addictive behavior with food. And I actually thought I had an eating disorder for a minute, and you know, figured out there were other things happening there. But yeah, just really, really scary flirtations with stuff. So talk to me about actually working through, trying to stop. Like, how's that been? And like, how are you going about it? How are you feeling? Like all of that stuff.
Okay, sure. Well, first, when I decided to, address my problem, my initial idea was to at least learn how to moderate my drinking, because I was so afraid that if I went cold turkey, I would have, DTs, which I forgot what it stands for, but that's like, the really
it's detox.
Yeah, the detox stuff, where you're trembling. Like there's a person whose name I won't say, but he's a fan of a lot of our shows. He's been struggling a lot with DTs lately. Shout out to you. You know who you are.
Love you, friend.
Yes, solidarity. So yeah, my initial thought was, okay, I'll just moderate it, maybe just, actually measure, like, how much alcohol I pour into a glass and how much, I don't know, water or Sprite or some other non-alcoholic beverage I'd put in. So that way I don't have just a 1 or 2 shots and go, okay, I'm done. Now what? I'm still thirsty. But then I discovered Smart Recovery, which is a science-based and secular recovery program. I went on their website to see if, first I thought that I was just going to do online meetings because I didn't know if there were any in the area, but there actually is one near me. And so I talked to the contact and I went to a meeting, and they said it was an abstinence-based thing. So I was like, oh, shit. But
and the distinction there, just for folks who may not be familiar, is that there are some programs that are based on moderation and saying like, well, I can get my use under control and I can use alcohol or whatever drug a healthy amount without abstaining completely. And then like Smart Recovery and like AA and NA, like those programs are based on abstinence, which means like cutting it out forever, no more ever.
Right. Yes. So yeah, it was difficult at first because, I didn't know any other alternative, but fortunately they do give you a little booklet that goes through the program. It's basically about, maintaining balance in your life and challenging all the thoughts in your head. a lot of it is sort of like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, And so, during the first couple of days, I was like, well, shit, it's 8 p.m. It's time for me to drink. What am I supposed to do now? So I looked in, and it basically sort of guides you through, like, telling yourself, like, okay, you think you absolutely need to have a drink, but you don't, and so it gives you ways to find other alternatives, instead of drinking. And that night I decided to, I don't know, watch Netflix. It was actually Star Trek Next Generation. So
nice.
The anti-drug.
Very nice.
And so I thought, okay, so maybe this is a good alternative. Maybe occupy my mind by, like, focusing on watching something rather than thinking about drinking. And that has definitely helped. Now, like I said, I didn't have any DTs or any with heavy-duty withdrawal symptoms during the first week. It was always more like a bad itch that I wanted to scratch real bad. You're driving down the road and all of a sudden your foot's itching and you're like, oh God, can I just pull over to the side of the road, take off my shoes and socks real quick, scratch, and then go back to it? No, I'm almost there. So it was almost like that, and I think I was actually more emotionally and mentally dependent on alcohol than physically dependent. So, yeah, that's been like the recovery process. I'm really good at avoiding alcohol because I think it's been about upcoming 6 weeks without a drink, maybe 5. I kind of lost count, but somewhere around that ballpark figure. Mm-hmm. However, I'm still working on the other stuff in the smart recovery, like, maintaining a balanced life and challenging a lot of negative thoughts in my head, because that's the other downside of quitting an addictive behavior. All the feelings you tried to medicate come back to you. They finally say, we need to talk, Trav. And you have no place else to go, so you're like, okay, we'll talk now.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I actually really like the Smart Recovery program. And when I was initially working through some of my really unhealthy relationship with food, I used a lot of their techniques. Like they have, and this is actually something that relates back to something that you sent me once, Ari. Because I remember I reached out to you and I was like, I think I'm having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, and I don't really know for sure, and I don't know how to deal with this stuff. And you sent me this worksheet that was like thinking rationally about where your head's at, and it reminds me a lot of some of the tools that Smart Recovery has.
It's CBT. That's what it is. Exactly what Trav said.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like a cost benefit analysis. So it's like, okay, what does it benefit me to do this? What does it benefit me to not do this? What does it cost me to do this? What does it cost me to not do this? And it's all evidence based, and I really like it. And it's kind of a direct response to the powerlessness model of the like NA and AA programs, because one of the tenets of a 12-step program is that you have to admit that you're powerless over your addiction and submit yourself to a higher power, whatever that higher power is. And obviously some of those programs are rooted very heavily in Christianity, and some are more like loosey-goosey, like spirituality kind of stuff. Like your higher power can be a pencil if you want it to be, kind of thing.
Your higher power can even be like your willpower or your desire to get better, which is kind of like, well, that's not really outside of yourself. So that's kind of bending the rules quite heavily. But, I would prefer that somebody do that rather than thinking, I myself can't ever do anything to make my life better, to get control over my addiction, because that's just not true.
Yeah, well, and the evidence is pretty mixed on the effectiveness of those programs. Like I was doing a lot of reading earlier today, prepping for the episode, just trying to figure out, where the discourse is and what the science actually says. And there's a lot of controversy on this. Like there doesn't seem to be like a massive consensus on one side or the other. Cause I found a lot of studies saying like, well, it is very effective under these circumstances. And then a lot of studies refuting those studies, and then a lot of studies refuting those studies. And it's like, not being a total expert myself, I'm like, well, shit, who do I believe? Because it's like, this is all apparently science.
I haven't read those reports, but I have heard from listening to other podcasts that have talked about this topic that especially the way that AA does their success rates is a little bit sketchy, in the sense that if a person gets a certain way through the program and then drops out, they'll say, oh, that person didn't complete the program, so that means that they're not counted in the numbers. We're only going to count people who completed it all the way through. Or they do complete all the way through and then they go back, on the bandwagon or off the bandwagon, whatever the phrase is. And they're like, well, they started drinking again, so clearly they didn't actually follow a program, so we're not going to count them in our statistics, which is very shady statistics practice there.
Yeah. Well, and so much of the program is predicated on anonymity anyways, right? So it's like it's hard to get numbers because you can only look at numbers from people who voluntarily identify themselves or rely on self-reporting and that kind of stuff. So like it would almost be impossible, I think, to find the exact to find those exact numbers. And like I was looking, and everyone like. And even the studies that I saw that affirmed the effectiveness of AA basically say that, like, well, yeah, it's super effective when combined with cognitive behavioral therapy,
right.
Or what's the other one? MET. It was like motivational enhanced techniques or something like that about like changing your behavior based on motivations.
I've never even heard of that.
I guess it's.
I don't know if that's a real thing.
I
It
wish-
could be. It could be some obscure clinical psychology thing that I've never heard of, but
Okay, yeah, motivational enhancement therapy. Is that anything that you know anything about?
I've never heard of it. I'm looking it up right now on drugabuse.gov, and it says that it has been used successfully with marijuana-dependent adults when combined with cognitive behavioral therapy. The results of MET are mixed for people abusing other drugs such as heroin, cocaine, and nicotine, and for adolescents who tend to use multiple drugs. It seems to be more effective for engaging drug abusers in treatment than for producing changes in drug use.
Interesting.
But it does say that it tends to work pretty well for alcohol abuse.
So what kind of specific things have you done, Trav, to work through? I mean, is it just mindfulness and like that kind of thing? Like what specific things do you do or go through? Like when when you're feeling the urge, like, oh, now is when I would normally drink, or I feel like I need a drink. Like, what do you do to work yourself out of that?
Oh, that's actually something I'm still working on. I need to really practice mindfulness more often because I get so wrapped up in my own head that I kind of forget to challenge the thoughts in my head, or even like be aware that I'm thinking an automatic negative thought. The few things that I have done is basically work and play. Either I try to write an article, or try to, edit a podcast, or I'm like, I don't know, rewatching Rick and Morty or watching Black Mirror, I'm still working in that area, so I don't really have like an actual step-by-step plan on, how to maintain my sobriety, I guess because it's still early in the game for me.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, distraction, like you try to distract yourself with other things, take your mind off of it, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've actually gotten to the point where I have to talk myself through a lot of things when I want to make healthy decisions with food, like, because I'm to the point in my recovery from my weight loss surgery where my body's tolerant of anything that I eat, really. Like, unless I have too much sugar, like my stomach kind of gets uncomfortable. But like, I mean, I could go eat small amounts, but like, I mean, I could go eat French fries and like deep fried food and all that kind of stuff. And I find myself craving that stuff. And, they'll have a party at work and they'll have like fried chicken and like deep fried everything. And I'm like, oh my God, I want that. Like, yeah. And like, I mean, the urge is real. And I have to do a lot of like self-talk, like, okay, you went through this super painful and expensive life-altering surgery to not have all of these health problems that you were on the cusp of with your weight, and like, you can still screw that up. So like, we should probably make the good decision here, and like, I have to talk myself through that. Like, it's a conversation I have to have with myself every single time. Is that something you find yourself doing?
Exactly. Yes. Cause I think, I don't know, I always had this, idea that if you feel an urge, then you have to do something about it. Like, I don't know, going to the bathroom, it's like, oh, you have an urge to go to the bathroom, you have to do it, but when it comes to, addictive behavior, not just with alcohol, but also with, self-harm, because that's another sort of addictive behavior that I've been struggling way longer than alcohol. I think even since my teens, maybe earlier. But, there's that idea that, if I feel the urge to either drink or cut myself, then I have to, But so really stopping myself from going there and really saying, do you though?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to do it? Really? It is a process. Yeah, I did an Eli Boss like, is it really? But yeah, getting into the habit of really stopping myself when I have those thoughts and reasoning my way through it, it's still something that I'm learning. I don't want to, make the listeners think that, oh, I'm all cured now. It's still in the early stages, and so there's still a lot of stuff that I need to learn.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Ari, do you have thoughts?
I
You've been
have
kinda
thoughts.
quiet.
I don't know what to say though. Like, ask me a question.
Well, you're the psychology
Yeah.
major, so you've obviously
There's so
have
many
something,
directions I
you know.
could go in. I guess I'll just say that, Trav, you talked a lot about alcohol and how it has a self-medicating effect for you, and that's
Yes.
very common among the queer community. Addiction
Yes.
is really high because there tends to be also a lot of depression, anxiety, a lot of trauma.
Exactly.
And alcohol and other drugs are ways that people can temporarily escape from those negative feelings without having to actually confront them. So it becomes kind of a Band-Aid
Exactly.
for a little while. So you engage in the drug and you feel better. You don't have to think about it. And then later, once it wears off, it comes back and you're like, well, it worked
exactly.
last time when I did this drug, I felt better, so I'll do it again. And then you start going down this cycle. So like you talked about, it's really difficult, and this is something that I've had to do. Although I don't have any addictions, miraculously, I don't know how that is, but in my trauma work, realizing that it's ultimately more healing to actually confront and heal the base issues that are causing you to seek out these distracting and self-medicating type of behaviors. It doesn't feel good, and it's a lot of work, and it's really difficult,
Yeah.
especially if it's a thought pattern or an emotional pattern that's been happening for many years or for your entire life. It's extremely difficult to change that kind of thinking pattern. It's a lot of work, and it can be quite painful, but in the end, it's really a lot more worth it than it is just kind of skating by and medicating yourself with whatever addiction that you choose in the time. And in the end, you can achieve actual healing and actual recovery rather than just kind of stuffing it down until it comes back again.
Exactly. In fact, that's something else I wanted to talk about. A lot of the feelings that I tried to drown out that I said a couple minutes ago are starting to say, Trav, we need to talk. And I'll say, okay, let's talk. A lot of those feelings, oh God, there's so many of them. Well, first of all, there's my ever, continuing struggle with self-acceptance. That's been a major thing. Like, part of it's like, self-acceptance as, a non-binary person, because I've internalized a lot of negative ideas that, well, because I still, look the way I do, and, I'm kind of not really quite sure whether or not I need hormones, and that, I, don't really have any plans to legally change my name or my gender marker, mostly because there isn't a third gender. There's no legal recognition for third genders in Maryland yet, but we're pretty progressive, so you never know. I often think that, well, because I have no need to have, I don't feel the need to have, any kind of surgery. Maybe I'm appropriating trans culture in order to, be hip and cool, because I don't know if you know this, Ari, but it's hip to be non-binary now.
It's really hip.
Yeah, yeah.
The hippest.
Yep, cool. And so that's one issue that I'm really struggling with, really giving myself permission to be myself as a non-binary person, really defining myself. And another thing that I'm really struggling with is, okay, as a social justice warrior, I often feel the need to always be perfect, because if I make one little mistake, I feel like, well, that's the end for me, And so there's this constant feeling, I don't know, it's a constant struggle to, be okay with the fact that, I'm not 100% bad, neither am I 100% good. I'm okay. I'm somewhere along a spectrum. I hope I'm more on the good side than the bad side, but, I'm human, goddammit,
Well, and there's a lot of anxiety associated with that, right? And so that's something that you try to medicate away.
Yeah. And also, lately in therapy, we've been discussing a lot of stuff from my past, too, because I often still feel like that depressed, angry, self-loathing 16-year-old, It's as if that I thought that I, grew past that, but that person is still inside me. That's why I'll often joke and say, hey, you ever read the book Perks of Being a Wallflower? I'm literally Charlie. It's
Yeah.
like that. It's like that part of me is still there and hasn't really had, it's still like that little person inside me still needs to really heal. That part of me still really needs to heal, even though, like, it's been over 15 years since I graduated high school, but still, it's like those old feelings of alienation and feeling like I'm nothing, and maybe what all the bullies told me was right. Those are some other feelings that, I'm kind of currently starting to deal with as well.
So how do you feel about the future? I mean, is this something that you're seeing as like a monumental struggle that you're going to have to like do a real hard uphill climb to get through, or do you feel like you're mostly over the hump at this point? Like how are you feeling about the future?
Oh, I don't really know, to be honest. I can't really make a prediction.
That's legit.
It's like I said, it's just like a little over a month into recovery, and so there's still so much left that I need to learn in order to maintain a balance in my life, and so I won't go back to medicating myself.
That's legit. Well, Trav, I want to say thank you for coming on the show and sharing all of this with us. I know it's not an easy thing to go through, probably not an easy thing to be super open about, and we appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on.
Why don't you tell everyone where we can find your things and find you on the internet? Give us the deets.
Sure. Well, unfortunately, I don't have an elaborate sign off like Ari does. I'm working on. Maybe the next time I'm on, I can do that. But
get your shit together, Trav.
Get out.
But for now, people can find me on iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher with both of my podcasts, the By Any Means podcast and the By Skeptical podcast. I don't really blog much, but I'll often post links to, my podcast episodes and also various writing I do at other sites on freethoughtblogs.com/byanymeans. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle is tmamone.
All right. Well, that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. We are a proud member of the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative. We're a group of trans podcasting badasses working to bring more trans voices into podcasting and other content creation. Search for the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative on Facebook for more info. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at podcast@thegaytheistmanifesto.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCallie. You can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheists. And we have a shiny new... Sorry. You interrupted me, you jerk.
Sorry.
No, there's more. We have a shiny new website at thegatheistmanifesto.com where you can find blogs and you can find the podcast and you can find fun little tidbits about Ari and I. So there's that too, thegatheistmanifesto.com. Check that out. And now it's time for Ari's outro.
Dun 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 dun. Do the Ario, swing your existential dread. Come on, it's time to go do the Ario. Follow me on Facebook. Let's do the Ario, but no pressure now. Do the Ario, Ari Stillman4 at gmail.com. Come on, I do the show. Do the Ario. Sis getting out of hand. SJW Circle Jerk. Let's do the Ario when you're ready now. Good try, sort of like that. Yay!
It took me a second to figure out what you were doing there. If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/thegatheistmanifesto and make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. And if you can't do that, you can still head over to iTunes, give us a 5-star review. That helps us get moved up in the rankings and get heard by more people. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.